Okay, so today we're going to talk about corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And this is something that we can use after we have shown that two triangles are congruent to be able to say that maybe an angle is congruent to another angle or a side is congruent to another side. Okay, so we want to know, is segment AE congruent to segment BD? And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out these triangles so it's a little bit easier for us to see. So we have triangle ADB, and then we have triangle BAE. And then we can mark what we already know from the diagram that angle D is congruent to angle E, and angle EAB is congruent to angle DBA. Okay, so when I write my proof, I can say that I know that angle D is congruent to angle E because it is given. Now this is just an example of a paragraph proof where you're writing sentences instead of the two columns. You have your statement and then because and then your reason. So it's just another way of looking at a proof. We could make this a two-column proof if we wanted to. All right, then we also know that angle DBA is congruent to angle EAB because it is given. Okay, now we're going to take a look at our diagram and see, is there anything else that we can say is congruent? Well, we can show that segment AB is congruent to itself. Okay, so we have AB is congruent to BA by the reflexive property. Notice I have not written what I'm trying to prove, which is this question here. Is segment AE congruent to segment BD? All right, then we can say, all right, well now I have angle, angle, side. So I can say that triangle ADB is congruent to triangle, and so B corresponds to A, E corresponds to D, and A corresponds to B. So triangle ADB is congruent to triangle BEA by the angle, angle, side conjecture. Okay? All right, so now that I have shown that all of those, that those two triangles are congruent, now I know because those two triangles are congruent, I know that corresponding parts are congruent. So if I have BD here and I have AE here, those are corresponding parts. So segment AE is congruent to segment BD because we have shown that the triangles are congruent. So corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So once you show that two triangles are congruent, you can then say that all of the corresponding parts are also congruent.